Okay, gentlemen, we're now going to look at question 2b, which is the last question on the topic of medicine on the Western Front in World War I. So, question 2b is worth 4 marks, which again means you want to spend 6 minutes on it, okay? And this is all about how you could continue an investigation. So this one says, how could you follow up source A to find out more about the treatment of battle injuries by medical staff on the Western Front? It also gives you some guidance on what you should do. So it says, in your answer, you must give the question you would ask and the type of source that you would use. So, the first thing that you do, as it clearly says, is study source A. So if we bring source A in again, you should recall that source A was this picture. Okay? And it says again, a photograph showing a British casualty clearing station on the Western Front. So all we need to do for this question is to pick out a detail, and you need to be specific with the detail. So in my case, I'm going to pick out this gentleman in the foreground with the head wound. That's going to be my detail, okay? And you then complete the template. So, it says detail in the source that I would follow up. And I would say the soldier in the foreground getting treatment for a head wound. You then have to state a question, something that you would ask. So in my case, I'm going to say, how were head wounds treated on the Western Front? That's my question. What type of source I could use? So a good source to use for this would be Royal Army Medical Corps, so RAMC records from casualty clearing stations. How this might help answer my question, it would tell me what treatment was given to people with head wounds. Okay, so quite a simple question. The biggest mistake that people tend to make on this question is not being detailed enough, okay? So you must refer to something specific in the source. Don't just say the injured soldiers. Refer to a particular soldier, okay? If it's a text, don't just refer to something vague. Put a quote down, okay? In terms of the type of sources that you could use, in most instances, you will find that Royal Army Medical Corps records, or possibly something like the diary entries of soldiers or nurses or doctors working on the Western Front, are good sources. But think carefully about what source you could use. But those are good examples: RAMC records and diary entries of doctors or of soldiers or of nurses on the Western Front. Okay. As I said, that's our last question now on the trenches and the Western Front in World War One. So we're now moving on, and we have 3 questions in section B, okay, on medicine in Britain 1250 to present. And the first one that we're looking at says, explain one way in which care in hospitals in the years 1250 to 1500 was different from care in hospital in the years 1700 to 1900. Okay, so in this case it's asking for a difference. It can ask for a similarity as well, okay? So it'll either ask for a difference or a similarity, so make sure you read question 3 carefully. And what you need to do for this particular question, it's always the same format. You need to provide a difference or similarity, whichever one it asks for. And then you need to provide evidence from period 1, which in this case is 1250 to 1500, and evidence from period 2, which again in this case is 1700 to 1900. Okay, so your sentence starters that you're going to use for this one is going to be the one key difference next, you're also going to give an example from both periods. So you would have, for example, in 1250 to 1500, whereas in 1700 to 1900, and another example. Okay, so for example, and those are your key sentence starters. I'll just highlight them now. One key difference, for example, in that period, whereas in. And that should get you full marks if you follow that structure. You've identified the difference, you've given evidence from both time periods. So for example, for this question, I would say one key difference was that religion played a bigger role in hospital care in 1250 to 1500 than in 1700 to 1900. And that on its own should be enough to get me 2 marks. But now to get full marks, which in this case, as I said, is 4, I need to give evidence from both periods. So I would go, for example, in 1250 to 1500, hospitals were run by monks who would try to treat people with prayer. Apology, I'm running out of space. Whereas in 1700 to 1900, trained doctors and nurses were aware that germs caused illness and wouldn't use religion in treatment. Okay. And again, as I said, this is 4 marks, which means that we are looking to do this in 6 minutes. Obviously, if you have additional time, you would need to calculate yourself how much extra to add on. But assuming no additional time, you have got 6 minutes on this question. Okay, we're going to flip on to question 4. Question 4 is a 12-mark question that will always say, explain. It will always start with explain, and it will give you a specific time period. So this one says, explain why there was progress in the prevention of illness in the years 1700 to present. As I said, it's worth 12 marks, which means that you are going to do this question in approximately 18 minutes. You have 2 bullet points always provided underneath, which in this case is the Public Health Act 1875 and healthy lifestyle campaigns. So again, the question is, explain why there was progress in the prevention of illness, key that you notice that is prevention of illness, in the years 1700 to present. Okay. The first bullet point is Public Health Act 1875. The second one is healthy lifestyle campaigns. And you also need one other one of yourself. And I would, in this case, I would go with vaccinations, personally. Okay. So, for this question, we've got no intro and no conclusion. We're not wasting time with any of those. Instead, what we are doing is we are writing 3 point evidence explanation paragraphs. So, the sentence starters that you need here, okay, are as follows, okay? So, I'm going to do my first paragraph, let's say, on vaccinations, okay? So, I would say one reason why there was progress was because of the development of vaccinations. So that's my point sentence, okay? You can clearly see that's my point. No evidence in there, okay? I haven't backed it up as yet. That comes next in my evidence section, okay? I would then go, for example. Okay? Now you want to give two pieces of evidence in an ideal world. So down here, we're also going to have a connective, something like in addition. Okay, so here are our sentence starters so far. One reason why there was progress was because. Okay, for example is one of our evidence sentence starters. In addition is another one. Okay, I'll explain what I mean by that. Okay, so in the case of vaccinations, I would say, for example, Edward Jenner created the first vaccination against smallpox a killer disease in 1794. Next piece of evidence. In addition, following the development of germ theory, Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch were able to create vaccinations for many diseases such as rabies and TB. So you'll notice that I've got a clear point, two pieces of evidence in this case, but what's missing is an explanation. So the last sentence of your paragraph must link back to the question. Okay, so in this case I would say this led to prevention of illness because. Okay, and again I'll just highlight that this led to, so something like that where you link back to the question is very, very important. Okay, so I would say this led to prevention of illness because thousands of people were vaccinated which prevented them from getting deadly diseases. Okay. And you simply repeat that 3 times. You need 3 paragraphs, okay? So my next paragraph possibly would be on government laws, and I would use the Public Health Act of 1875 to talk about that. Or maybe I would make it actually about sanitary conditions. So I might say another reason why there was progress was because of improvements in living conditions. And then I would talk about, I'd go, for example, the 1875 Public Health Act made it the law that local councils had to provide housing inspectors and health inspectors, as well as better sewage systems and water systems. Okay. In addition, Joseph Bazalgette developed the London sewer system in the 1800s, which reduced the amount of diseases caused by dirty water and lack of good quality toilet facilities. This led to the prevention of illness because it was cleaning up the living conditions, and poor living conditions can create illness. Okay? And then again, healthy lifestyle campaigns. I'd go, one reason why there was progress in the prevention of illness in the year 1700 to present was because of the promotion of healthy lifestyle campaigns. For example, the government launched many campaigns encouraging people to live healthy lifestyles, such as the 5-a-day campaign or Stoptober, which encouraged people to stop drinking for the month of October. In addition, the government also launched campaigns to encourage people not to smoke, with large advertising campaigns all over television and extremely graphic images on cigarette packets. This led to prevention of illness because it meant that the public were able to change their lifestyle in order to do things that would encourage them to be healthy, such as eating fruit and veg, and stop themselves from doing things that would cause illness, such as lung cancer as a result of smoking. So as I said, 18 minutes, 3 paragraphs, no intro or conclusion, and 3 point evidence explanation paragraphs. Okay, we move on to the last question now. This is the only question where you get a choice. Okay, so question 5 or question 6. It's worth 16 marks, which means that it takes 24 minutes approximately to complete. It will always be written in the format of a statement, and then how far do you agree? There was little progress in understanding the cause of disease in the years 1250 to 1700. How far do you agree? And then there will be bullet points underneath. You may use the following in your answer. The Great Plague in London, 1665, and Thomas Sydenham. Okay? Or alternatively, the advances in surgery made in the years 1700 to 1900 were more significant than the advances in surgery made in the period 1900 to present. How far do you agree? And again, they've given us the point of, you may use the following in your answer. So they've given us antiseptics, which would be from the period 1700 to 1900, Joseph Lister, and transplants, which would be from the later period, 1900 to present. Okay. Now, in my case, if I had this exam paper, there isn't a shadow of a doubt I would choose question 5. I consider that to be an easier question. In addition, you only need to know about one time period. However, you may feel differently, and perhaps if you've got questions similar to these two, you would choose 6. That is your choice. One other thing to note, okay? Total for spelling, punctuation, grammar, and use of specialist terminology, 4 marks. Meaning that whichever question you choose, 5 or 6, is in reality worth 20 marks. Okay? So very useful to know, if you finish your exam with a couple of minutes left, you don't have time to read through the entire paper in 2 minutes and check your answers. Where you should start is your last question, because you may be able to tidy up some spelling and grammar and get an extra couple of marks very quickly, because this one is the one that has the SPAG grading. Okay? Okay, so we've made the decision that we're going to do this one. There was little progress in understanding the causes of disease in the years 1250 to 1700. How far do you agree? Explain your answer. So first of all, we cross number 5 with what would be our black pen. I'm using this pencil because it's easier to see. And we then begin our answer. So, what you are looking for in terms of structure with this one is an intro. And that intro should answer the question and signpost. What do I mean by signpost? I mean mention what you will write about. You are then going to write 3 point evidence explanation paragraphs. 3 in total. You will then have a conclusion where you will repeat your judgment. Please notice that I said repeat your judgment, not state your judgment. In order to access the highest marks for this question, level 4, 13 to 16 out of 16, you must have your answer, your judgment running all the way through the question. In your intro, in your point evidence explanation paragraphs, and in your conclusion. It specifically says in the exam scheme, in the mark scheme, an analytical focus is maintained throughout. That is the examiner's fancy way of saying he answers the question all the way through. Okay? So, in the case of this question, which is worth repeating, is there was little progress in the understanding of the causes of disease 1250 to 1700. How far do you agree with the given factors of the Great Plague, Thomas Sydenham, and you must also use your own information. So in my case, I'm going to have a section on Galen / Hippocrates. And bloodletting. Okay, that's going to be my probably second paragraph. So, here's what I would do. First thing you're going to do in your intro, you're going to answer the question. So I would say, I agree that there was little progress in the understanding of illness in the period 1250 to 1700. Okay, and then I'm going to signpost. there was very little development in how people treated or understood major outbreaks of disease or daily illness. However, there were some individuals that developed medical understanding, but overall there was very little progress. So I've answered the question. I've signposted to what I'm going to mention. I'm going to talk about, he now knows I'm going to have a big paragraph on major outbreaks of disease. I'm going to have a big paragraph on how daily illness was treated. And I'm going to have a big paragraph on those people that did improve treatment. Okay? So, I then have my first point evidence explanation paragraph. I've done my intro. I've then got my PEE paragraph. So, I would say, in the period 1250 to 1700, there was very little progress in how major outbreaks of illness were treated. That's my point. Next, I have my evidence. Evidence of this can be seen in the fact that treatment for the Black Death and the Great Plague were very similar. For example, during the Black Death, it was widely believed that illness was transferred from person to person by miasma, and therefore people would walk around with sweet-smelling herbs underneath their nose. It was also believed that illness was caused by miasma during the Great Plague, and as a result, in London, large fires were burnt every few houses in an attempt to clean the air. Okay? You could add to that, you could further add to that, okay? You could add other evidence of how it was treated in a similar way, okay? Once you've given your evidence, you then link back to the question. The fact that there was very little difference in the treatment of the Black Death and the treatment of the Great Plague shows that there was very little change in the understanding of what caused illness. Okay? Next to your second paragraph. Another reason why there was very little progress in understanding of what caused illness in the period 1250 to 1700 is the fact that treatment for daily injuries did not change greatly. During this period, most people continued to believe Galen and Hippocrates' ideas that illness was caused by imbalance of the four humours. As a result, they would treat illness through bleeding and purging rather than looking at the core illnesses. And again, you need to link back to the question. The fact that treatment for daily illnesses did not change during a 400-year period shows that there was very limited development in the understanding of the causes of illness in this period. You're then going to have your however paragraph. If we look back, it gives you the bullet point of Thomas Sydenham. Okay? And I'm going to use that and some other facts from my own knowledge. However, there was some progress during this period in the understanding of what caused disease. For example, Thomas Sydenham, who was known as the English Hippocrates, believed that doctors should study illnesses and then treat them accordingly, rather than bleeding and purging for everything. In addition, the work of William Harvey on the blood system showed that Galen was not right about everything. In addition, the work of Andreas Vesalius showed that much of Galen's work was also incorrect. However, the work of these individuals did not massively change most people's understanding of what caused disease and illness. And most illnesses were treated via bleeding and purging throughout this period. You've then got your conclusion, where you sum up what you think. In conclusion, there was very little progress in understanding of diseases in the period 1250 to 1700. There was some progress by individuals such as Thomas Sydenham, Andreas Vesalius and William Harvey during this period, but overall treatment remained the same throughout, with most people following the ideas of Galen and Hippocrates.